It is Christ in you. In every age, Jesus is working in all those who make up his church. He works in each one individually, but not as somebody isolated, but as a part of the mystical body. St. Paul says in a different way what Jesus said repeatedly. If you want to be my follower, take up your cross daily and follow me. Each one will have a share in the cross. And this means not only that you are going to have your share of pain and trouble if you follow him, but it means that your very suffering, sorrow, and trouble is not loss, but gain. All suffering can be redemptive if it is united to the suffering of Jesus. In order to understand this, an example is given of a series of numbers. Let's say every number is a 0. But if you put a 1 in front of those zeros, then they all have value. And so, our sufferings are like zeros. But if you put the suffering and death of Jesus in front of our suffering and death, then they have much value. We make up the church, which is his body. United to him who is the head, the work of redemption goes on in every age. Like St. Paul, we have our chance to fill up what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ. God wants us to have a share in his great plan of salvation, of bringing men to heaven to participate in his divine life, and to see him face to face in a beatific vision. The act of Father Corby in giving absolution from sins was an act of helping to ensure that the immense suffering and death of a great and terrible battle would be united to the redemptive suffering and death of Jesus. As he tells us himself, it was not limited to the Union soldiers, but was directed to everybody, including the Confederates. To all who were disposed, to all who were ready to accept the grace of the sacrament, even without conscious awareness, the blood of Christ on Calvary joined the blood of the men on the battlefield of Gettysburg, and the blood shed here became redemptive blood. The date was July the 2nd, 1863. The opposing generals were Robert E. Lee and George Meade. The Union soldiers were gathered under General Winfield Hancock here on Cemetery Ridge. The Confederate lines with 200 cannon and between 80 and 100,000 men were posted about a mile away on what is called Cemetery Ridge. General Meade had even more men. He also had 300 cannon, but because of the broken nature of the countryside, he could not use them all at once. Father Corby, in his book of the Memoirs of the Chaplain, describes the scene. He says this: even veterans who had often smelled powder quailed at the thought of the final conflict. At about 4 o'clock, the Confederates commenced firing, and 120 cannon from their side belched forth from their fiery throats missiles of death into our line.